My parlay this weekend on BTN picks was a bit of a letdown, but you know what wasn't? The Ole Miss-Oklahoma game. We'll get to this game and more later. I'm Drury, and this is the BTN Ranking Show, so don't go anywhere. Starting the Week 10 slate off strong as Oklahoma's homecoming game, the 7th BTN-ranked Ole Miss Rebels traveled to Norman to face the 17th-ranked Sooners and came away with a key road win. Pinning a top offense against one of the best defenses in the country, I felt this game could go one of two ways. Either Ole Miss runs the Oklahoma defense out of their own stadium and Oklahoma's offense can't keep up, or the Sooners' defense lives up to the hype and stops the Rebels' offense in their tracks. Surprisingly, we got a mix of both. Both teams performed well on all three levels, but in the end, OU's defense just wasn't as good as they thought, and Brent Venables saying they had the better team was truly an interesting take.
Just curious as your thoughts following the game. Coach Brent Venables said you felt like he had the better team. Just your overall thoughts on that.
That's an interesting take. That's a hot take. You have a better team. I wouldn't have thought that people watching would say that. You know, I felt that we won at their place in weather that as a defensive head coach you would normally wish for, and won by 8 points. And I think we left a lot out there. I think we should have won by a couple scores.
Ole Miss came out with the win at 34-26. In another marquee SEC matchup, a BTN game of the week, the location of College Game Day was in Nashville, Tennessee for the first time in 17 years, and the game between Missouri and 20th-ranked Vanderbilt was a great one. In pregame coverage, many highlighted Diego Pavia, star quarterback for Vanderbilt, as a key to the game. But because of the Tigers' death row defense, Pavia was irrelevant for most of the game, and as the game progressed, neither team had particularly great success in the red zone, and going into halftime, the score was tied at a field goal each. Unfortunately for Mizzou, before and after two significant injuries to key role players, starting QB Bo Pubula and star tight end Brett Northfleet, the Tigers struggled to find any particular rhythm on offense and struggled to capitalize on great scoring opportunities. This theme would be crucial down the stretch, as after a penalty-ridden drive by the Commodores ended in a late in the fourth quarter touchdown, true freshman quarterback Matt Zollers had to lead the Tigers on a miracle drive, one that almost ended in sending the game to overtime if Kevin Coleman was only a foot back when he caught a Hail Mary on the 1-inch line as time expired, which ended the game with a score of 17-10. In our final story, truly putting the L in LSU, Brian Kelly led his Tigers one last time on Saturday night as they lost again to Texas A&M. And to the surprise of few, he was fired from the post less than 24 hours later. When looking at the history of LSU, Kelly was the weak link in a history of very successful coaches and truly was subpar at best to their program standards. At 5-3 this season, LSU's playoff hopes are doused, but looking ahead, finding the right leader for the program will be no easy task, and this job vacancy is added to a long list of other openings this season. With those stories out of the way, the BTN Top 25 has seen teams rise and fall out of the ranks, and starting at the bottom, we have seen some surprising appearances. At 25 comes James Madison, and as the Dukes are 6-1, they have had a great season thus far. Next is Oregon, who after their win against Wisconsin moves up 6 spots to appear in the top 25 for the first time in a few weeks. Rising 27 spots, USC comes in at 23 as their win against Michigan has been retroactively accepted as a ranked win as Michigan moves into the top 25 in raw rank. UNLV remains at 22 after their bye week, and Oklahoma falls down to 21 after their loss to Ole Miss. And so does Boise State and South Florida, who at 20 and 19 respectively both fall 4 spots. Navy rises a spot to 18, and moving up to 17 is Tennessee after beating Kentucky. Vanderbilt also rises 4 spots after their win against Missouri, and at 15 is Nebraska, who after bouncing back from their loss against Minnesota, falls again by 1 spot. Notre Dame falls as well as they move to 14, and Tulane falls 2 spots as they slide to 13. Starting what would be the college football playoff bracket if it were up to the BTN, Virginia sits at 12, rising 1 spot after week 9. Georgia Tech rises as well, receiving their best rank all season at 11. Louisville moves to 10, and at 9 sits by BYU, who rises after beating Iowa State. The 7 and 8 spots both remain untouched as Ole Miss and Cincinnati remain at those spots respectively. Miami falls 2 spots to 6, and Georgia starts the top 5 as they rise 1 spot after their bye week. Texas A&M took care of business this weekend, blowing out LSU, and they were rewarded by moving up to the 4th spot. The top 3 remained untouched this past week as Alabama sits at 3, Indiana takes the 2nd spot, and Ohio State sits atop the country for the 2nd week in a row, continuing their 8-week streak among the top 5. As we move past the newest rankings of the BTN, we look ahead to Week 10 and what are the BTN games of the week. Starting in the SEC, 17th ranked Tennessee hosts Oklahoma in Knoxville, and the Sooners, coming off of their loss to Ole Miss, sitting at 21, are slated as underdogs. And Tennessee is favored at 5.5 points, and the total sits at 53.5. In a great Big Ten matchup, 23rd ranked USC travels to Lincoln, Nebraska, and faces off against the 15th ranked Huskers, and the Huskers are favored to win by 8.5 points, and the total sits at 54.5. Finally, the host of College Game Day, a matchup between two Big 12 opponents. Utah hosts 8th-ranked Cincinnati, and while some favor Utah, the BTN favors Cincinnati by 10.5 points, and the total sits at 51.5. For our final segment of the day, we move to Ben's Best Bets, presented by BTN Picks. BTN Picks is our brand new game where you can make picks on the top college football matchups each week and compete against your friends, rise their ranks, and win bragging rights. Ben's Best Bets is a weekly parlay I made in the game, and like I said in the open, my parlay last week was anything but best. But this week, the parlay will hopefully be better, and it starts in the Big Ten as Indiana goes on the road to play Maryland. They are 2 touchdown plus favorites and with a spread at 14.5. And for the parlay, I picked Indiana to not only win, but to cover as well, and for the game to go over the total of 50.5. In a matchup between Notre Dame and Boston College, I picked Notre Dame to win, and for the game to go over the total of 49.5. In an SEC matchup, Ole Miss hosts South Carolina, and Ole Miss looks to repeat their performance from last week. I did pick Ole Miss to win, which isn't a surprise, but I did pick South Carolina to cover, which could be a hot take.
That's an interesting take. That's a hot take.
Additionally, I picked the game to go under the total of 58.5, and in the final leg of the parlay, Georgia Tech, who is undefeated, faces off against NC State, and I picked Georgia Tech to win and cover the spread of 6.5 points. With that, that's all we have for the BTN Ranking Show this week. I'm Ben Drury. Good night.